It is indeed your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso, right here on S3. Welcome to it. What a morning.
Sure.
What a morning. We've had some pretty interesting conversation, that is without a doubt. But we are shifting gears a little bit. We are focusing on relationships. But now, I mean, it's no secret that kids undergo a whirlwind of emotions as they grow up. I mean, we can see that in our lives as well with our kids. And this can affect their personality, their views on the world, the way they make friends, and how they build trust in others. But when you throw school into the mix as well, it can stir things up a little bit, for the better or for the worse. So this morning here with us, we unpacking this topic. Councillor Ashley Lawrence joins us in studio. Welcome, Ash. Lovely to have you back.
Lovely to see you guys again.
Ash, you stepped into a crazy show today. We have been processing, and I love that we're turning the lens now to our little ones, because I see this. I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. The 3-year-old, I'm just going to park her right now, and we're going to deal with that when she's 16 because it's just intense. But I think part of what blows my mind is they've got the same levels of perception. So all the tools are there, they just don't have the operating system. So all of the emotion, the intensity, it's all there. And when my little man comes back from school now, and he's just started in a big school where their boys going all the way up to matric, it's a completely different environment. But they do so much to foster that trust. But when it comes to that social dynamic that's not in our control, when they move into that school environment, how do they go about forming trust and relationships when they're out of our care?
Yeah, and it's awesome that we're actually taking the topic of relationships and going back to childhood, because that is what forms.
That's where it begins.
It's where it begins, and it's what we're going to take moving forward. So one of the two main ways that children are going to essentially learn trust is firstly through what is modeled at home. What's happening, between the parents, how you're interacting with a child. So that's going to set our tone for how we're going to bring that into our school environment. So that's looking at attachments, and that's what we can unpack.
That's what you do, not what you say.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So they model our behavior. The second way that we see kids actually really starting to learn social skills, and this is quite interesting, is that kids learn through play. They learn how to trust one another, how to interact with one another, rules, social skills.
Disappointment,
emotional regulation through playing constructive games, fantasy games. So they're testing out everything that they've seen on TV, at home, and that is how they're going to learn, through games and through projects, teamwork.
Yeah, like download that operating system, essentially.
And function, because at the end of the day, for any young child to form a good connection with another child at school, it can be so beneficial to their journey in school. And on the other side, it can also make it very difficult for them to try and foster these relationships. Maybe they're not linking onto another kid that they, thought that could potentially be a good friend. But there's so many different factors at play, like you said, the modeling of behavior at home and what the parents do. But now you throw them into a school, which is a completely new environment. There's so many other factors. How does that impact that forming of trust, that relationship?
It's a sudden ramp up.
Yes,
all of a sudden they're in this strange environment.
Yeah, and then there's this whole lot of anxiety, and kids are going through, especially it's the first day of school, there's a lot of anxiety. So kids are naturally quite trusting, so they are going to look toward the other kids, the friendly faces, and then the teachers are going to play a huge role in making that environment feel safe for that child to go and explore.
Can I just say to the teachers out there that you truly are superheroes.
Magical,
in terms of how I see that you guys are dealing with the children from my own perspective as well. Hats off. Hats off.
Completely.
You guys are amazing.
And so much that speaks to the resources that those teachers have to fulfill that role. And very often I think there is this added pressure of, we hand you over. Our kids are yours now for the next 6 hours, but it's a relationship between the teacher and the parent, and I get that, but that comes with quite a privileged schooling system. I make no bones about that. I understand the privilege that's attached to that. Why is it so important that they have these autonomous relationships and trust with other people that aren't maybe you as the parent? Why do they need their own lives, essentially?
Well, unless you want your kids to be living with you for the rest of their lives, this is going to be quite an important thing, because not only do our relationships and our trusting relationships with others obviously influence our social environment, how we're going to show up in the world, but it also influences how we feel about ourselves and how we trust ourselves, which is quite interesting. So if I'm continually, excuse me, being betrayed, you know, I've had negative experiences, I've been bullied, I'm going to internalize that, and it's really going to affect my self-esteem growing up. And, you know, everything we do is social. Everything we do is social. So that can really hinder a child's development.
Absolutely. I want to ask this because if I take a look at, you know, a grown-up in their space and, you know, myself as well, when it comes to trust and relationships, I mean, I've got a handful of very small, close friends, Graham being one of them, that I trust. But with kids, throwing them into a scenario like school, do they trust easier than us adults? And what can that potentially lead to?
Yes. So kids, they do trust more naturally, simply because, well, there's quite a few factors.
They haven't been burned.
They haven't been burned.
Baggage,
They haven't been burned. So there's not these past experiences that they're drawing on continuously. You know, they're present. They're playing, you know, they're taking the moment to moment. You know, they're not necessarily thinking of motives, of, you know, social dynamics. Kids very much
no
take...
agenda.
There's no agenda, and kids very much take things on face value. So if you're being nice to me now, I'm going to trust you. I'm not going to maybe think about yesterday or the following day. And also, kids don't have the expectations that we have of, you know, each other as adults.
And if they get hurt in those scenarios, I mean, this is the learning curve. This is how they learn how to deal with those situations, with those scenarios where they thought they could trust someone, but they couldn't. And then it's really, I think, up to the parents to help facilitate so that it become a positive learning experience.
Well, but this is the bottom line, and something I'm learning through my own personal experience of these last few crazy years. It's not the trauma necessarily that leaves the mark. It's your lack of processing of the trauma. Trauma is there all the time. It's kind of the lived experience. But so many of us, if we track back through our own childhood, that developmental phase, those markers, that anchor, that emotional point that we keep getting pulled back to stemmed from someone not explaining or allowing us to process that. So maybe there's something in that to think of your kids as little grown-ups that still need to work through and process, but they just don't have the tools to do that. That's where you step in, but make no mistake, they're still feeling it as intensely. More about how we can develop trust within our children and the teenage years in just a moment. Oh, goodness.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Oh, thank you so much, gents. Vitally important information coming out there. Let's return to another vitally important conversation, talking about developing trust within relationships when it comes to our kids and our teens. The sense of security is so important, as trust really does lay the foundation of positive learning, social skills, vital later in life, adaptability, and, of course, the emotional development in school children. And after all, friends are a crucial part of that school experience. In fact, you're pretty much going to become an average of your friends. That seems to be how it works. And we are back with one of our favorites, Councillor Ashley Lawrence, to delve deeper into how kids can trust their friends and why it's so important. And we're going to take the step up, to teens.
Yeah, and to what extent? What does it look like?
You're knocking on this door now, aren't you?
Oh, it's close. It's growing up way too fast. So we've spoken about how kids go about building trust in relationships, but in schools as well. But now teenagers. Is it a different way? How do they approach it? Obviously, we know that there's a lot more emotion involved as well.
Stormy seas.
Absolutely. It's actually, it's definitely called the stormy stage, even in the developmental textbooks. So, so spot
That's
on.
so funny.
But absolutely, you know, as we were saying earlier, smaller kids are going to learn through play, right? Teenagers, they actually start entering into social contracts with one another. So there is a lot more sort of at stake, and there's a lot more sort of moral reasoning that's going to come in.
That does speak to an agenda now. Now there is a reason you've got that's loaded. Yeah.
Yes, so there's an agenda. So it's all about, have you got my back? Very big is, can I trust you? Are you keeping my secrets? Right? Are you showing up for me? So it becomes a lot deeper and a lot more meaningful, more than do I just like to kick the ball around with this person. This is really, really where we see friendships and relationships starting to form.
Sure.
And that's so it's almost less energetic, because you, especially with like all boys or all girls environments when they're younger, you kind of just let them do their thing. But this is where that balance starts to come
But
in.
also, I mean, that playing field is much wider now. If you take a look at things like social media that comes into play, and just like we said, the emotional stresses that they experience at school as well. But from a parent's point of view, we know, for kids in general, it's difficult to chat about things, especially when you enter the teenage years. If something that is bothering you, that is not sitting well with you, to go and translate that to your parents. Is there a way that a parent can are there telltale signs that parents can go, look, but something is off with regards to my child and perhaps the relationship? Because obviously the parents will know the other person as well.
Yes, so in those situations, you really do want to be aware of what's happening with your kids, and less about what they say, because as you're saying,
how they act.
How they act. Teenagers, don't talk to me. I'm not going to tell my parents about anything that's
Doors
going on
locked.
in my life. Yeah, done. So you want to observe, are they going to that friend's house often? What mood are they in when they come back from that friend? Do they want to spend time with that friend? So you're really going to kind of be picking up these situations. And then, as we should all with our kids, try and build that, really safe space that they feel they can communicate in a non-judgmental environment, so that you can, just say, look, I've maybe noticed this and this, is everything okay? But you want to remain non-judgmental. You don't want to tell them what to do, even if you're like, ooh, this is not a great trend.
It's going to trigger you in a crazy way if it's your kid especially.
Yes.
I really do get that. I suppose there's this wonderful dynamic tension where you're constantly looking for the situation. So is my child mistrusting because of a situation, because she's been hurt, she's been through something that's broken that trust, or is she living out my truth? And there's this part of a problem, or not, maybe a challenge I need to work with in them, or is this situational? How do we kind of meet in the middle with these two goals? Because there are going to be situations that break their trust, but it also could speak to a part of their own development that needs to be focused on. So how do we then discern what the right approach is, or how to focus on it?
And I think it's, as parents, we want to protect our children. We want to,
Step in and fight.
Step them and fight and stand up for them. But the best thing that you can do is equip your child with those skills. And as sort of difficult as it may seem, speaking is not going to do it. It's going to be how you act. So how are you and your partner dealing with disagreements? How are you guys communicating with one another? Because that is going to allow that child to sort of internalize that model of, okay, mom and dad can have a spat, but they forgive each other, that's all right.
And they talk about it.
Yes, they talk about it. So really paying attention to how you're modeling your behavior at home, and really just listening in a judgment.
And I do think that, just bringing that particular point up, I mean, we all go about our lives and we know it. It's crazy. It's kids, it's work, it's whatever. So just, and we don't take note or take stock of how your interaction with your partner in the household affects the children. And maybe that's just the refresher that we needed this morning, to realize that your actions really do speak louder than words. And it's a tough landscape to navigate. You've got to take a step back, take a breath as a parent, and really just take a keen interest and look at your child and what they are going through.
Yep, and yourself. I have a feeling the mirror needs to come up for this one. Ash, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Hopefully this has helped you just a little bit.